Live.
Okay, we are now live.
This is a meeting of Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing to take testimony on what it has, some people call a COVID-19 bill. We've been calling it our fast track. It's a bill that would appropriate money that could be released and approved earlier on than what would be permitted under the big bill. And so we've been hearing from committee chairs as to ways that they would recommend or areas that they would recommend that this funding move forward. And our education committee has been working on this. And so I asked the chair to come in this afternoon and run through the proposals and why, the thinking, why to do it on a fast track as opposed to the budget adjustment. In other words, the kind of the time sensitivity involved. So
Sure.
I'm glad that we have Senator Campion and he can run through. We had a lively discussion yesterday around literacy and concern over the fact that our students, even prior to the pandemic, were not reading at the level in third grade that we would hope they would be. I'm sure the pandemic and remote learning and all that's gone on since then is only exacerbated the problem. So we're going to, just to let you know, we had a great discussion around the importance of literacy, quite a bit of concern as to why this is happening and what is considered a well-funded public educational system, and what you are proposing as a way of recognizing or beginning to tackle that reality. So I'm going to let you take it from there, Brian, and thank you for coming in.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. For the record, Brian Campion, State Senator, Bennington County and Wilmington. Why don't I pick up on the literacy discussion first? Yes, this is old news for Vermont, but one that we have really been sinking our teeth into, and that is the low literacy rates of our third graders. When students reach third grade, roughly half still aren't reading and writing at grade level. And if you're not reading and writing at grade level, as you've probably heard and may have discussed yesterday, by the time you're in third grade, the problem just gets harder and more difficult to fix as you go forward. So, we could talk about how this happened, and we have taken a little testimony on why we have this problem, and it is complex. It has to do with, different kinds of reading, how different teachers were trained to teach reading over the years. There were reading wars in the United States in terms of what is most effective. But one thing that I have been one consistent message that I have heard over and over again this year is do not blame it on poverty. And really is, for a long time, people have said we can't do it because students, they don't have a lot of books in their house, or we have, they come from a family of readers. Over and over again, the research shows that if the person in the classroom knows how to effectively teach reading, 95% of our students will learn how to read effectively. So of course, there is the poverty. It's not as though it's not an issue, but it is incredibly diminished once you get somebody who knows how to teach reading well. And I think that's part of the problem that we're seeing and why we have this problem, in part because we have, I think, not talking specifically Vermont, but for a long time in the United States have said we can't do things because of students' backgrounds. And that is one piece of testimony that we have heard consistently. We should forget about the poverty piece, focus on the person, in the classroom. So we did suggest a fast track of $3 million that would go to the Agency of Education for them to distribute, to get teachers trained. We heard really interesting stories, particularly from Williamstown, where we heard that teachers who had studied elementary education then left their programs and did not feel as though that they were equipped to teach reading and writing. They ended up using the Stern Center as a program. This, we'd be limiting where teachers could go, where the agency would direct funds. But if you look at the Williamstown example, they really made some big improvements in literacy by getting their teachers train. We're also working on a more complex literacy bill that looks at the issue of teacher education, looks at the agency, looks at those kinds of issues. And what you're looking at is just a piece of it, but a really important piece, and that is training teachers. The other piece is that we're hoping,
Brian, on the
yeah,
3 million, what
Yeah.
will that get us in terms of, would that provide statewide resource? How
Yeah.
many teachers?
So
I mean,
we're looking, we were given the number of, basically you should look at it this at $2,500 per teacher. So I'm not sure what that is with the 3 million. I have that figure somewhere.
all right, that came from the agency then?
That came from the agency, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We also were so impressed, just moving off of literacy to access to higher education. We were incredibly impressed by what the McClure Foundation did for Vermonters last year by allowing all graduating high school seniors to take a class at CCV. Huge success. It was a very simple program. The simplicity to implement gave a number of students that hadn't even thought about college took a class for the first time. We also think this is an important program to continue, but we talk about even expanding it, giving students access to our other state colleges. And is there a way, we thought it would be great to have any Vermont resident who might be transitioning into a new job, who might need new skills to take a class at CCV or one of our state colleges. We
Similar
also
to what we did in the spring, we had almost 1,000 Vermonters sign up for courses or certificate programs at our state college system. So it sounds like you would like to blend what was done in that earlier slug of workforce and development and then the CCV opportunity. My question, how do they measure the impact of giving the CCV course? Are they getting a sense that more kids are connected to higher ed or willing to contemplate a post-graduation activities or skills development?
They're still tracking that information. They're still trying to figure out if students that may have taken this free class then continued on. So they're still in the process of tracking some of that. They're measuring their success just by the number of students that actually enrolled. I mean, they ended up putting, I think it was roughly $700,000 investment from the McClure Foundation. And that's a lot of students, taking that one course. And for students that had a rough academic year, given COVID, it helped boost them up. Others, it was the first time, they were even thinking about college. So we did hear from 3 students that came in to talk about their CCV experiences. And it was the range, but largely these were students that without that sort of making it free, making it that easily accessible, they wouldn't have done it.
Okay. Bobby, you're muted though.
No, right now.
Yeah, Brian, thanks for looking into that. I'm wondering where does this problem with the reading start? Is it in preschool? Is it in the first grade, second grade, or do we need to retrain all those folks in the pipeline so that we can take care of this issue?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're finding that the best group to train is basically pre-K, kindergarten, up to second grade. But I think we also have to do 2 things at the same time. We have to train those teachers so that kids are reading at grade level, by the time they get to 3rd grade. While at the same time, and we're hearing testimony from the agency later today, is we have to beef up what's happening in the agency around literacy. So if, for example, Senator Starr, those teachers that we're about to invest in, if they were to move, retire, take a different kind of job, that we're not in the same position that we are in right now in 5 to 10 years. The agency itself needs to have people that are that are experts and can do this kind of training and continue this kind of work that we're hoping to start.
It seems
Yeah.
like though, like you had talked about, teachers saying that they didn't get the
Training.
necessary training and educational background to actually perform what is a critical part of their job, which then speaks to somehow influencing the way the expectations or requirements for certification, that there has to be proficiency in reading, in the mastery of the teaching of reading. So this helps in the short term, and it will carry that investment for those teachers who remain. But if new ones coming in, or we have teachers leaving, then it raises the larger issue around how we can provide assurances that this is in fact made a component of our preparation for teaching. But
Yeah.
and I know
So-
you're looking at that in
We
terms of
are.
the pedagogy and
Yeah.
the way in which the coursework includes this. So there, if that can happen, and this just becomes part of how the skills that you would have when you walk into a classroom, then this is kind of bridge money and longer term investment, because you probably could have master teachers at that point who are very proficient in the teaching of reading and help new teachers. But this on the one-time 3 million seems like it would be a pretty significant impact on at least that cohort of teachers in our
If you,
primary school.
if you figured 2,500, I believe you said,
Yeah.
Brian, that's 1,300 positions that
Yeah.
could be up trained, so.
And the programs that we heard, there are multiple programs out there, but we would want the agency to distribute this. But we've talked a lot about evidence-based structured literacy learning instruction. And the Stern Center does a great job. That's where, we've heard a lot of great things, but there are other programs out there, and it usually takes about 9 months of the teachers, evenings, not every evening, but it's a process. But to Senator Kitchell's point, we are also in the process in this bill. We would be assessing and looking at standards so that our teachers, we know that they're coming from institutions, whether in state or out of state, that again have the skills to teach reading.
Good.
So we left off the 700,000 it's what was made available last year through the McClure Foundation, and that was to provide the opportunity for a free class to a Vermont senior. That was specifically at CCV, but it could be Vermont State College or CCV. It's from what you're saying. Then the other would be, so this kind of has two components, one of which is a second round of funding for the more workforce segment of Vermonters who want courses or certificate programs, and then the free course or the dual enrollment for the senior, specifically for Vermont high school seniors.
That's right.
Okay. Since we're looking at the ESSER 2 money, which is how we funded the Burlington school system, it seems like the reason I'm asking is we probably need to think about the funding source behind the one course for CCV versus the larger adult workforce component of this, and whether that might be general fund. I'm just looking at a split between the two populations within your proposal. Okay, well, you have more, I know.
Yes, so we have, we also just looking ahead to the summer for kids. And, Senator Perchlik has done great work. He is a member of the after school. I'm not exactly sure of the group, but the after school group, if you will, Holly Morehouse and that team working to expand after school programs in the state. And what we have here is an appropriation that would go to the After School for All grant programs to really do a few different things, to allow kids to afford these programs, but also to expand programs and create new programs where they would be needed. And the reason we would want this expedited is given, of course, the timing. You know, this is, people are going to have to gear up. You have children, you're thinking about summer programs are going to have to expand. They might have to hire a few new faculty, staff. If you're in an area where there are no summer programs, you might actually have to create a summer program. And I want to give credit to Senator Perchlik. He's been really working on this kind of thing. We also talk in this section of our letter about other needs. One of which would be, supporting a collaboration between AOE and Department of Health to educate parents in particular on the signs of depression and suicide, and to provide information and resources for assistance. We all know that's a real concern. Senator Kitchell, you asked me to check in with the Department of Health to see how they were going to be using their suicide grant. They are still waiting they've yet to get back to us exactly on that, but we did have somebody in yesterday that does believe that geared specifically toward parents in a collaboration with AOE is a good way to go. We also talked about training, making certain that all the teachers and coaches in our summer programs are aware of these kinds of things, you know, the depression signs, the suicide signs. We want to make certain that, you know, we're taking a lot of preventative measures this summer. Along those lines, we did ask for money for the Department of Education and for to actually have money to go out and talk to some of these families that have really their children that have left the system. We've heard from principals.
Oh, the ghost students.
The ghost students who are just who really aren't connected. I know my uncle's a principal up in Hardwick. I haven't talked to him about that, but I know we've heard from other principals throughout the state what they're seeing. You know, how they're driving around, kind of reconnecting with these families. And so I think it's important that we direct the agency to do this work. You know, again, we've heard from multiple folks that really just bringing students and their families back into the educational fold, giving children, you know, a robust, exciting, safe summer where they can feel good about what they're doing and about themselves is going to go a long way. And then finally, and this really would tie in, I think, to Senator Starr's work, we just put in, you know, we also, I think everybody here agrees, we don't want any child to go hungry. You know, we want students to have access to nutritious foods. I know Senator Starr's committee is doing a lot of work on this. We just put a $500,000 placeholder in just the idea that the Agency of Education, Department of Health, you know, should make certain that children have access to nutritious foods this summer.
And we're going to be sending you down a bill by the end of the week, Brian. Hopefully, so when we get back, you'll have it to deal with.
Great.
Okay. Senator Baruch, did I see your hand up?
You did. So Brian, those things all sound great. I'm wondering on the after school program, the cannabis bill that the governor let become law directs a stream of money to after school programs. And I know Andy Perchlik is on the task force.
Right.
Is this money, in other words, has the task force created a kind of structure to receive the cannabis money, and this is going into that, or is this going into?
No, this, I think this would be a bridge to be when the cannabis money becomes available.
I'm just wondering if it'll go, I wondered about the cannabis money. Is that going to go into a fund that's distributed to districts, or I'm unclear on how that money will move. And I'm wondering if this money is moving differently or if it is sort of pioneering the new movement of the money.
So Stephanie, do you know, in the bill that we passed, Tax and Regulate, a portion was devoted to we had prevention, we had after school programs, we had all the, let's see, the sales tax goes into the ed fund. So can you answer Senator Bruce's question about how the funding how that structure would be for that revenue stream.
So when the tax starts coming in, first we pay off the deficit that's accrued on the admin side.
Mhm.
And then the other piece is that a portion of it, I think it's 30%, goes into a special fund for addressing,
After school.
you'll determine, but it's like the service side. And then the remainder is to be determined how you spend.
Well, I'm positive that it is earmarked for after school.
Yeah.
Because that was the governor's condition of,
I don't.
Those
think that's the
dollars
way it
are
ended
not,
up.
I mean, those dollars aren't available at this point. These
no,
are-
no.
Right, these are
my
dollars that
question
we're
is-
just trying to move now so that kids can have those programs.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the money that you're requesting is going to flow in the same structures as that money or different structures. How is the money that you're asking for going to be dispersed?
It's being appropriated to the Agency of Education in the absence of that special fund being created yet.
And then it's grants?
Yes, and so in a separate bill, and this might be helpful, we are working on giving some guidance around how these kinds of things would be distributed. And I'm happy to send that down your way. It was suggested that I just send dollar amounts this time, but I am happy to send the language that we would have around distributing these that we've worked with the after-school groups and other groups on.
Yep.
Well, if we put money in this fast track bill, we would need to have those parameters along with the money. So,
We'll send them your way.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's just a matter of providing it.
Yeah,
Although I think knowing that there is a funding stream in the future, one of the concerns if we're using one-time money, the ability to continue them out into the future. And of course, that would be a revenue stream to permit that to happen. I don't know whether the timing's going to work or how long the bridge has to be in all essence. Do you have any idea, Senator Sears? When are we going to see money?
that depends, right, on how many people are going to start smoking.
So don't worry, they'll show up.
So
Okay.
You're muted, Senator. Senator Sears, you're muted.
the fiscal
Nick,
note
you're
originally assumed that money would start to come in 2023, fiscal
2023.
2023. Thank you, Stephanie. I've lost my, oh my God, now I left the meeting, I'm afraid.
No, no,
Cancel
we-
that.
your
Oh, we
camera's
hear
on.
you.
What have I done to myself?
You just got to
Just
turn your
turn your
video back
camera
on.
back.
Oh my God, Brian, what did you do to me?
I'll tell you, this is a great committee.
Yeah, well,
It's
I was
seamless.
just practicing for the next witness.
Well,
How
Brian,
to
it's quite
disappear.
surprising, but we're quite efficient. We can. get a-
I'm not questioning your efficiency whatsoever.
Well, it may appear that we get a little distracted, but in the end, we move very quickly. So,
I hope at the end of 2 years chairing education, I can say the same. I'm a little worried what they're doing down there without me.
I would be worried too.
Yeah,
uh-huh.
There's some bills
all
in
right,
there
so-
that are really,
The GO students are putting
Yeah.
together these kind of multidisciplinary teams to go out where they say they know where these students are, they know, who they are, and it's making sort of that connection back. How much was the price tag on that one?
we talked to the agency. They're going to talk to you as well, but they suggested $500,000, or that's what we put in after
Okay.
talking with them.
Okay. All right. Do
You guys want to take a vote while I'm here, or would you rather?
No.
no, we're going to hold you in suspense.
Do
It's
I
a
need to-
secret ballot.
Should I have Senator Hooker whip this vote, or just kind of just leave with good feelings and just see what happens, Senator
Yes,
Kitchell?
I think you
Yeah.
can leave with good feelings, Brian.
You just get the third graders straightened out.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I really appreciate it. Dick, do you have any
Thank you,
questions for me
Brian.
before I take off?
No, I do not at this point,
All
but
right.
it's been really fun.
Yeah, it's been
Um,
great.
You know, and just be careful out there on the West End.
Thank you. I will. I
Those
will.
of us in the contaminated zone,
Yes.
counting on you.
No,
Thank-
you're only in the corrective action plan zone or something.
Yeah, actually, you know, that's true.
Mhm.
Thank you, Senator Kitchell, for having me.
Oh, you're
Oh, and
welcome.
I'll just mention one thing, Senator Bound, while I have you, I overnighted my trustee ballot because I received it yesterday.
And we will reimburse you for that mail.
$26. I couldn't believe it. If anybody wins by one vote.
$26.
Oh,
Well, it
Yeah.
proves the point. We shouldn't even have votes on these trustees.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
all right.
Pass that bill. Oh, it hasn't
All right.
been introduced yet.
So maybe we can go back and just have thoughts about what Brian is asking for. This, except probably in my mind, the money that would go to support unemployed Vermont workers to take courses or certificates like they did. And was that 3 million, Stephanie, that we did in the spring? With CRF money for that purpose? It served almost 1,000, was close to 1,000 Vermonters took advantage of that.
I thought it
I'll
was in
find
the
out the
hundreds of
amount. I don't think
thousands.
it was anywhere near $3 million.
I thought it
Okay.
was 600,000.
Oh, no, maybe 1, 2.
It was
I'll,
like
I'll go look on the
1,000.
sheet.
and-
I'll go open the CRF
Okay.
sheet and find it.
So what I'm thinking is the last federal bill that came in had money for our K through 12 system, and 12 million is here at the state level at the Agency of Education. And the governor, in the budget adjustment, we spent 3.5 of it. So we have about 9.2 million of that money that's at the agency to appropriate. And so to me, what we're doing is identifying the ways that new federal money could be appropriated to support the needs of Vermont students. And so that's why I wanted to set aside the money that from a different pot as it would relate to the adults. So can I have just how people are feeling about what the Education Committee is recommending? Senator Bruce.
I support all those initiatives. I think there are things that in a time where we didn't have as much one-time money or as much federal money, we would wind up throwing, half of them out. Not that they weren't good, but that we didn't have enough. But at this particular moment, I think we could fund all of those things. And, the last one you mentioned seems like it leverages against what we're trying to do to help the state colleges. The literacy seems to me to be it's almost like
You have.
deferred maintenance on kids. And we have the money right now to deal with that problem. So
Mhm.
I strongly support them all.
Okay. I don't think we're in a position where because we're talking about one-time money, of course, we have to recognize that it's got to be spent in such a way that it doesn't build a base expectation or a base need. But it seems like what we're talking about is pretty consistent with other decisions that we've made relative to one-time money. Senator Starr, you're just itching to make your point.
No, I'm not itching. I was just thinking, I had my finger out, scratch my nose. No, I support all those things, but I want to make sure, or I'd like to make sure that these colleges that are training these students, and we're helping to pay for some of them. I mean, we're paying good bucks for the training and they aren't getting the training. I think those folks should be called in and visited with by somebody, because we shouldn't be paying twice, to get a job done.
Well, I
Bobby, do you
think
mean
in this, we're probably paying more than once because we're helping fund the state college system that's providing the educational services, but not all of them are being educated through that system. And
Oh,
then we're
no.
paying again to remediate on the individual student level. But it seems to me everybody's agreeing that this is a well-defined area that of educational deficit that we have an opportunity to really make some progress on by making our teachers more proficient in how they instruct and teach younger students to read. So do I hear any other, I think that the constraints on money are not what we would normally experience, which is kind of hard for us to adjust. So I'm not asking, oh, should we cut this by this or that at this point? It's more getting a sense of the proposals and how they do or don't lend themselves to an expedited bill.
Oh, fine.
Okay, Alice?
A question with regard to the nutrition programs and where the other money in other programs is going, like the farm to school, is that all coordinated? Or are we just, it seems like there are so many different ones, and are some already doing this, or?
Yes.
That should really be, we should have,
Hunger-free Vermont, Farm to School, Farm to Plate, they all work together, Alice.
well, do they?
Yeah, they're well core. Food banks in on it. Yeah, they work very well together. I've had
I
them
think
in
it's
on
probably
this-
analogous to the housing where you have different entities, but they work very closely together to address housing needs. Each have a different area of specialization, but I think it's a very good question because some of it tends to get a little ad hoc. And, I think farm to school, I didn't realize so much of it really was buying refrigeration.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was actually getting the food out to schools, but I guess a lot of it is not. So
Have
Senator
a place
Westman,
to put it.
yeah.
So it would be helpful to me to figure out what exactly is coming down the pike from you, Bobby, and in different places for money for schools.
Well, the only thing we're doing is putting that universal meals program together. And we dealt a lot with the food supply side of that, but we have 70 odd schools now that are already doing universal, and we
And
did not.
what does universal mean?
Means
It means that
everybody
all-
gets it regardless of income. It's not that you're asking for
Right.
well, we used to have subsidized, but we kind of got rid of it and funded. So we have free and then regular. So
Reduced.
universal means it doesn't matter what your family income is. Everybody is treated the same and gets their meals provided. So, but the only thing I thought universal school meals was the position at the agency to help the schools enroll and the necessary administrative work.
Yeah, they're having a heck of a time. They can't get it zeroed in right how to get the family incomes so that we'll still continue to get our free and reduced meals. So we're still working on that, but we're only asking to we're recommending to Brian and the Ed Committee to push for a 5-year phase in so that we would only be picking up like 20% of the remaining schools over the next period of years so that we can work into it. And if we run into bumps, it can be adjusted, tweaked.
Is this all within the framework of the federal nutrition program where a certain percentage of your students have to be income
Yeah.
eligible and then everybody gets brought in?
Right,
So,
40%.
There will be some schools in very affluent areas that won't meet that test.
Right.
Well, what we're working on, and it's been allowed, is any schools within a supervised union at the present time can share numbers or average numbers. So and we asked the ed department to see if they could get a waiver to make that even a little bit bigger.
Maybe we could
district.
argue the whole state is a school district.
Well, that, we brought that up, and they kind of hemmed and hawed on that one, but that did float to the top because there's only 70,000 kids. Hell, most cities have more children than that, out of state, big cities. And so they're working well with us, I should say.
Well,
And
then what is it you're recommending to education? Are you recommending a position to do the necessary administrative work to get all schools, as many schools enrolled?
One position to help Rosie with the nutrition reporting and helping the districts to get, enroll. And we've got to figure out the funding for that. If there would be on the ed fund of that 20%, what that's gonna cost.
Isn't that around 40, 50 million?
That was for the whole show, but
Oh.
figure that out. Say there's 75,000 kids and you feed every one of them, which not every one of them is gonna go. And not everyone's gonna qualify, maybe, or whatever. But you cut that number down to 60 and multiply it by $5 a meal, and you don't get anywhere near $50 million.
Well, I remember it did have a big price tag. If the state had to underwrite.
They're inflating the numbers. And
Who
we
is the
told them
they? Who's the they?
the ed department.
Oh.
They're counting no federal dollars coming in, and they're counting like every kid eats.
All right. Well, we need this sounds like an ongoing, potentially expensive obligation.
Yeah.
And I think it's beyond an expedited bill.
Oh, yes.
All right. That's. And if there's a question about the estimates from the Agency of Education, we can always, I'm sure joint fiscal, there's a fiscal note on it somewhere.
They're already working on it, Jane.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on. It's a little bit earlier, but Chrissy just said that we have the auditor in the waiting room. And so we had some time this afternoon. I was trying to get as much of the 2022 budget testimony finished before we we're going to take a week off. Everybody's scheduling meetings for next week. So I was very short notice, but I'm very happy that our auditor, Doug Hoffer, was able to make time out of his schedule today to come and talk to us about the budget request that he has for his office for the upcoming fiscal year. So thank you very much, Doug, and thank you for your flexibility to make yourself available. You're muted, though.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay.
I sent some material over. You probably haven't had a chance to look at it. I'm sorry about that. I should have sent it sooner, but pretty straightforward. And our dollars are not big, as you know, but for the first time during my tenure, we actually have some increases. Measured against inflation, our budget has gone down for each of the last 6 or 7 years, but we can't say that this year. But as John Belushi said in the caverns below the auditorium and the Blues Brothers, it's not my fault. There are some
I think that's the Capitol Police, right?
Yeah, it's not our fault. No.
There are three main items that have caused us to request a somewhat increased budget appropriation. And the first and biggest is that, the single audit, as you probably know, is comes and goes in terms of the number of programs that are subject to the audit each year. And that varies over time. This was always expected to be one of the higher years, but because of COVID, it's gone up even more. Now, we do have a little bit of CRF money to help cover some of that gap, but not enough. So that's up about $250,000. We also have the 27th pay period, which is not covered in our case, as it is for most entities in state government because of the cost. That's $2. And we have a fee for service increase from DGS that wasn't expected. In addition, I was very fortunate after suffering through quite a while with some vacancies to find and hire three really exceptional people. I could not be happier with the crew we have right now. One from DC, who was with JFO, or GAO, I should say, excuse me, and another from Austin, Texas. Both exceptional, very experienced, sharp people. And the third.
Couldn't find any Vermonters? Not a single Vermonter could do that job.
I don't know if they could do it, but none of them applied and had the experience to compare with these guys. I'm with you. I'd love to hire Vermont, believe me.
So Senator Baruth has a question.
Doug, I'm just wondering, I have been looking for a paper or a set of notes that we can look at. Did something go out to the committee? I don't see anything.
Yes, I sent a little memo that we sent to House Approps, and Chrissy got it a little while ago. Maybe it hasn't come out to you guys yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
I apologize. It should be in all of your inboxes at 11:54 a.m. today. You'll see the attachment there. I can read it again right now, so it's top of your inbox.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, Senator Starr, I'd love to hire Vermonters.
On the other hand, Doug, we're trying to attract people to Vermont. And so hopefully we've got a couple of people and they have families and children and long-term attachment.
Actually, they both have families and children.
Oh, good.
I don't want to know if they signed up for the new worker thing, okay? I don't want to go there.
Okay.
Anyway, they're exceptional. I'm very pleased to have them. There was virtually no training involved. They got up to speed immediately, so I'm really excited about that. Having said that, they were a little more expensive than we would have expected from somebody with less experience. And on the general fund side, we had a modest increase for a couple of reasons. One, changes, this is always the case in people's choices about their benefit package. That's mostly what happened there. So those are the things that caused us to ask for more. I had virtually no control over them.
You've muted again.
That one was my fault. As you know, I think the SARF can be paid by state agencies and departments from federal dollars to the extent they have them. That doesn't mean it's not an opportunity cost. They could use it for something else, but it's not like it comes out of their general fund pocket. That's the good news. Also, we are on the same page with the administration about how to deal with our TIF billings. Up until now, it's been a little cockeyed and made it difficult for us to bill it into the SARF. Going forward, we're going to be able to do that, and that's not insubstantial, and that will help us pay for some of these new staff costs.
Oh, so that has been resolved then in terms of.
You guys will resolve it, but yes, we're with the administration. We were going to do it last year, but with the pandemic, we said, let's just put it off and wait till later.
Okay.
So here we are. That will help. As I mentioned, we do have 50,000 this year and 50 next for additional single audit costs related to the CRF. That's a help. And a few years back, we made a decision in discussion with finance and management about how we were going to deal with departments and agencies that had re-audits that were their fault, the result of actions or inactions within the agency or department that led to the requirement for a re-audit. The choice is obviously to bill it out across the entire universe or to make them pay for it, and we're going to make them pay for it. It's, for some entities, it's not that big a disincentive. If your budget is hundreds of millions of dollars and an extra 50 grand won't make you change your ways if you're not ready to do that. But anyway, we can build a scoff laws for that. That'll help.
Doug, but I thought that we were doing so much better in repeat audit findings, and that we review them, joint fiscal, we put in a practice that they're presented to the joint fiscal for review. And the policy committees are supposed to be paying attention if it appears that there's something that is just continuous and being ignored. So the last of joint fiscal, we looked at the numbers. One of your staff members came in and presented, and I was left with the impression that that there's been a lot of emphasis on the part of the administration to get this cleaned up. And so would you confirm that's where we are? Not that it's perfect, obviously.
Yeah, no, we've done it. It's not just us. It's not even primarily us. It's mostly the departments and agencies themselves, primarily because two people who are no longer with finance and management, Nancy and Karen, who are gone, really worked hard with their colleagues throughout state government, with then KPMG and now CLA, to really drill down and say, look, this is silly. We can't keep making these mistakes. And you're right. The last one was 2, and that's down from about 15. So I didn't mean to make more of it than there is. It's only 50 grand. We're estimating about 25 grand for each re-audit. There's only 2. So
Okay.
in our budget, 50 grand is a lot of money. Sorry.
No, I didn't. I wasn't so much about the money. I was just, I just wanted to clarify or confirm that where we are today is quite different than when you were first concerned about this. And that was when we instituted the practice for the joint, for that there would be legislative review and attention given to this, because it did represent cost.
Indeed. Yes, as Bernie would say, it's a huge improvement. No question about it. We've done, state government's done a great job. And some hats off to CLA as well as finance and management. Major improvement. So that's basically the story. There's not much more to it. As I say, the percentages don't look happy, but the dollar amounts are modest, and we really have no choice. You have to do the single audit. It costs what it costs.
Okay.
Having said that, we are still, I think, going to be coming in below the estimate for the CLA contract, so which allows us to do this DOL work that the governor asked us to help with without going crazy on a contract. So we're in good shape.
Good, good. All right, questions of the auditor. Senator Sears, you're going to ask about the sheriffs? You're muted.
Well, I'm muted.
Oh.
I think Doug muted me. I am going to ask about the sheriffs, but I do want to take a moment to think off the top of my head. We're doing this bill on pandemic-related issues one time. It seems to me that understanding how an audit of the sheriffs and how they've used state paid deputies during the pandemic is perhaps a pandemic fundable item, which we could put in the bill. And it's especially important, I think, right now, while we have a bill over in the House Government Operations Committee to unionize the state paid deputies. And we don't even know if we still need 24 or 25 of them, frankly. I am growing concerned that, like many things, the court has learned during this pandemic that in many cases going virtual is preferable to, and I think as they come out of the pandemic, you're going to continue to see a lot of arraignments done virtually, and there won't be as much need for transport. So, and given some of the complaints you've had about state paid, and I know down here in Bennington County, we've seen where some towns are billed the same deputy at the same time, which may be billing errors, but may not be. So I think there's a lot of concern about that. So that for me, the quicker we could get this done, particularly would be helpful. And I'm just wondering if it's possible that the pandemic, this one-time money might not be available.
There may well be an opportunity to do that, but recall that we started talking about the sheriffs before you contacted me or spoke with your colleagues, because I had a whistleblower who actually was a deputy for the.
Well, I didn't know if I was supposed to say that publicly, that you had whistleblower complaints. That's why I didn't say that.
Thank you. I'm not naming anybody, but we did have somebody come in and discuss with us concerns that 2 other counties. As it happened, we weren't ready to start that job, and then you came along, so we're going to fold them together. Having said that, even if there were additional funds available to get it started, it's a question of having the bodies. The person that I've assigned to this job is available right now. I didn't want to give you or anybody else, personal details, but she's headed for family medical leave for at least 6 or 8 weeks for some health-related stuff. And we just don't have any other bodies that are, sitting around. Everybody's engaged.
Well, I didn't know if you could farm it out.
It's possible.
That using the additional funding that could be available.
There's no reason why not. That could be done. Yeah.
If we could get an estimate on that and we all agreed to put it into the one-time bill that we're working on right now.
The job itself, as I think is pretty straightforward. Doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I mean,
Yeah.
what did they do and
Right.
what did they do with them during the pandemic when they, I know that, for example, talked to the Lamoille County Sheriff who sent his deputies over to Chittenden County to cover homeless folks living in motels because the Chittenden Sheriff wouldn't.
So I guess then we'll put that on our list. I think Senator Sears is saying, and maybe in light of the workload and the leave situation, that the auditor's office is this a small project that could be contracted out, and we would need the money that we're working from. The CRF is pretty well obligated, but there's general fund to help. So we could see what the price tag might be, and we'll put it on our list, to come back and say in or out. And maybe Doug can give us a little idea of what the price tag might be.
Be happy to do that.
Okay. All right. So Stephanie will.
Well, I'm glad it's out there that there have been whistleblower complaints as well, because I didn't know if people are allowed to say that.
I didn't name anybody. That's what I'm.
No, I know. So it's okay to.
It's okay to indicate that there have been there's been a whistleblower complaint.
Yeah.
Other questions of the auditor? Doug, I know that we have one of the things that we have to consider, and that is business grants. And I know that you have shared some of your thoughts with the chair of economic development. So that is something that is related to this to not the budget 22 budget, which is what we brought you in here for. So we're kind of doing 2 things at once, one of which is on this fast track bill with some one-time spending to add the contract for an audit of the sheriffs. That's been added to the list for us to consider and make a final decision. But the other area is additional money for business grants, which has been proposed. And I know that you have had thoughts which you've shared with Senator Sorokin. So I don't know if you want to share any observations or thoughts with us, because ultimately we have to make a decision around appropriating money for this purpose.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. It's obviously it's of concern to everybody. Our concerns are very similar to the ones we shared with you and your colleagues last year. There's really only 2 of them, and then one off to the side. And the first is the agency's decision, and it's not just Commerce, it's the tax department, and to some extent AHS on the healthcare side as well, based their evaluation of applicants' need on revenue. I know you all have heard this before, either from Quebec, some of your colleagues, or from us. And while lost revenue is a big deal, we know that many, many businesses and nonprofits, to the extent possible, when the knowledge of the severity of the pandemic became clear, they made decisions about downsizing their overhead and their businesses, often including layoffs, which is too bad, but there was a whole other streams of money for that. So to the extent, if your revenues were $1 million in April of last year, but they were only 600,000 last month, that doesn't mean that you lost $400,000, because you may well have reduced your overhead by several $100,000. So That's an issue, and we are investigating that as part of the audit that's ongoing right now. But I think, unless I'm mistaken, that Commerce intends to pursue a similar eligibility path this time as they did before. That's one of the issues. The other is, since I gather, unless I'm mistaken, the primary interest is in businesses that started either late in 19 or early in 20 and don't have enough history
Right.
to satisfy the revenue loss question. That's a challenge in and of itself. But as I pointed out back then, the data is very clear nationwide, not just in Vermont. Startups fail at a very high rate. So to say that we want to help all businesses, including those that are relatively new, sounds good, and we're trying to be helpful, but there's considerable risk. A good number, a high percentage of those businesses would have failed even without the pandemic. I'm not sure what the answer is and how to get around it or through it, but it's a risk that you guys need to be aware of.
Okay.
You very well give money to businesses that might have failed by now anyway.
Yeah, there was some suggestion we had from Tom Cabet that we should at least have a basic profit and loss. And I would think there might be, even though you might have acquired a business, if it was one that had been in operation, you normally, before you make a decision to purchase that, you're looking at those records and what the revenues were into that business before you say it's a business I want to buy. So there might be ways to, if it has been the purchase of an existing ongoing business, to have that historical record. So, but I know that this is an area that our Economic Development Committee, well, all of us on Joint Fiscal have struggled with, and that is the extent to which, if you look at where some of these grants have gone, not that they didn't qualify under the rules, but it raised some very fundamental questions about the lack of money going out in a strategic way to where it was needed, and the impact was most acute as opposed to other areas, other businesses. So we still have that issue. The question, I guess, ultimately is what parameters or what conditions make sense so that if we fund it, it's as targeted or strategic as we can make it.
I
So
agree.
that's our challenge.
Scheduled to be done at 3.
That would suggest slowing the train down a little bit. I know there's a desire to get this done as quickly as possible, but if you want to avoid or mitigate some of this risk, if not all of it, it will take a little bit of time for you folks and your colleagues to think it through. And by the
Senator
way,
Westman, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would just say, Doug, that I totally agree with that. But the thing that hampered us over the last year was that deadline that we faced that told us that we had to get everything out by the end of the year. So it made it very hard for us to be thoughtful in the way we handed the money out. Because at the point in time we were handing it out, none of us knew.
right, I understand. That's fair enough.
Although I would say in December, the legislature was very, very aggressive about being more strategic. And that's when we had the recognition, particularly of our hospitality and our recreation sector, because of the disproportionate impact of the governor's declaration. I mean, some were just plain shut down by virtue of that declaration. So it's an area we continue to struggle. I realize when you think about the over 300 million that we put out to business grants, how much do we want to obsess over 10 million, but it's still, we still feel a responsibility to if we're spending money, then how to make sure that we're directing it in the most effective way. Did I see somebody else's hand or no? Doug, you have more to say about that?
Yeah, real quick, a couple of things. One, it's very early in the process and my chief auditor doesn't like it when I get ahead of the work, but she and her team have begun to review the applications and the materials for many of the, not many, a sample of the businesses from the first and second phases. And there are some who actually ended up better off in 2020 because of the money that you gave them
Yeah.
than they were before.
Mhm. We know that, and that's troubling because they got the money to end up better off at the expense of less money available to go to the, to be targeted to the businesses that needed the most or had been impacted the most.
So two final, not minor, but lesser concerns. One is clawback. There should always be clawback provisions in these bills, if nothing else, to let people know in advance that, hey, I better keep it together because somebody's going to be looking over my shoulder down the road. And second, as we asked you guys last time, please make sure that ACCD is required to put audit provisions in all of those grant documents so that we can do our work after the fact, although I think it's unlikely that we're going to be looking at the 10 million piece. But we needed the audit provisions in the grants that went out last year so that we can go into those businesses if necessary and get the information that we need to inform you.
Well, I raised that question early on because for one very small nonprofit, we said on a volunteer organization, you could be subject to an audit and you have no capability. So we ended up funneling it through. In this case, it was the Vermont Food Bank, which has the administrative capability, deals with funding streams and so forth. And I was told that anybody who received these federal funds could be potentially the subject of an audit, and they needed to be told that that could happen since it was federal money. So I don't know what communication there was, but some people might be surprised to have an auditor knock at their door.
Well, two things. First, I expect what you heard was a reference to the inclusion of these programs in the single audit. That is strictly a compliance audit, and that would be done by CLA and not by us. In any case.
No, no, okay, no. I wasn't thinking it would be subject to the single audit, but it could be subject to an audit.
They would be.
I mean, the federal funds, but.
Definitely, they are subject to the single audit, but that's strictly compliance. That's not performance. And I can assure you that when we do a job like this, there's no point in us pursuing very small grants to very small organizations. But we would never target, intentionally or otherwise, entities that really don't have the wherewithal and didn't receive enough to make it worth our while.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions of the auditor? So if you will just let joint fiscal and know about what the amount might be for the contract for that audit for sheriffs. If we contracted it out, then we could put that on our list. And then the other is obviously the year 22 budget is pretty straightforward. The big thing is the cost and the CRF money. So, okay.
What is your timeline on that bill? Yesterday?
It'll be after town meeting. The House is voting on it just this week.
Okay. I'll get you something, if not this week, then early next week.
All right, that would be great. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Unless there are further questions of the auditor? Okay, then appreciate your coming. And Chrissy, I'm just looking at I'll have to pull up, I'm looking at the auditor's memo here to the House, so.
We have Commissioner Tierney will be joining us at 3. We have her from 3 to 3:30. I can zip a note to see if she can join us a little bit early.
That would be great.
Okay.
Because she had something that she had to do after that, so giving her a little bit more time.
Yeah, I'll zip her a note now.
The House, I was talking to Representative Hooper, and someone is offering an amendment. I don't think it's going to move forward, but which I had forwarded to Senator Sears and a copy to Senator Lyons. And that was VSEA was requesting that correctional officers and I think probation officers should be moved to the top priority for vaccine, COVID, which is, so I let Senator Sears know, my response was, this is a public health policy issue. And for the budget committee to go in and somehow intervene or override a decision by Dr. Levine was not the position that we felt comfortable in taking. And so I did send it to both Senator Sears and Senator Lyons, the request. But someone on the House side, I guess, is going to offer an amendment relative to prioritization for vaccines for this group of state employees. So Senator Sears, your hand
Yeah,
is up.
I appreciate that, that you sent that to us. I haven't responded because the legislature would need to make a decision that it's going to get involved with the governor's emergency orders. And I think there's just as good an argument, if not better, for teachers if we're really going to get schools up and running. So I think once we step into that area, we better be prepared to step into all of them. And then we change the entire plan of the governor, even if one disagrees with him on his priority list. I'm not sure that the legislature should at this point get involved unless it makes a decision that we're going to do and make our own decisions and go against his executive order. I just don't know how we pick and choose which groups to prioritize without the science behind it.
I agree. If I can just
Yes,
in
Senator
on that.
Ruth and then Senator Westman.
I think the worst possible world would be to have the legislature through the legislative process and all the, lobbying that goes on and, voting that goes on with insufficient information sometimes, to replace the operation that's been up and running with that seems like the worst of all possible worlds.
I just want to also add that I've got a lot of constituents who've written me with vulnerable spouses or parents or children with significant illnesses that could be deadly if they caught COVID, and that they should be at the head of the.
Well, we're hearing from a range of
So I
groups,
think there's
from
just a
retail
number of
sales
those.
people, grocery stores to
Yep.
obviously public transit drivers. So if the minute you'd have, I think what precipitated it, and maybe you can check it out, was I was told by Senator Ingalls that he had heard that the inmates were being immunized, and that was vaccinated, I'm sorry. So that may have precipitated it, something to just check out, but. Senator Westman.
If you look at the age chart that they put out.
Oh, only 10 were under 65.
Yeah, and the number of people that are likely for COVID to be fatal for people under 65 is something under 0.5%. And it goes up dramatically as soon as you hit 65. And so that has been their bright line. And I would say, how many teachers are teaching or people are working that are over 65? It's a very small number compared to the total. And when you have a very limited number of vaccines, that it's very clear when you look at the age chart what is the need to be able to do that. And I think I would suspect we would all want to give everybody the shot if we had an unlimited amount, but we don't. And so that age chart speaks volumes for itself.
Well, it's also the precedent of using a budgetary bill to be the vehicle by which you're requesting a major policy decision. So I wanted to let the committee know that there was an amendment. I don't think House Appropriations necessarily would support it for all the reasons that we've identified. We have tended to be very respectful to the science and the data And yes, and there's a difference between, exposure and even getting the virus as opposed to who's at highest risk of death. And it's really where's the mortality risk? And it's very clear from what Dr. Levine provided us is that it's age 65 and older. And that is the premise. And that is, where is the risk of death the greatest? And so I personally don't feel I would have the public health expertise to counter a decision based on the facts that we were given. But it's a request, and I understand why people want it, and they feel, that they should get at the head of the line.
We all wish we had.
Concern. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. But I think we all wish we had vaccine for everybody.
Well, that's true. Senator Sears.
A bigger concern for me is that in Massachusetts, less than half the guards, in Massachusetts, they're allowed to use the guard. Less than half the guards have voluntarily been vaccinated. So you have this group who may not want to be. I know at the Veterans Home, most of the staff were vaccinated, and I think all but 3 or 4 residents chose to get the vaccination. So it's much larger group. I don't know what Vermont Corrections staff would be like in terms of that.
In terms of the take-up, yeah.
In terms of the take-up, whether it be voluntary or not, but that's, to me, the bigger problem we face as we go to younger groups and others is folks who are refusing to vaccinate. And what do you do?
Actually, I'm on a board of a residential care facility. 100% of all residents, and I think only 4 staff refused. But we were told that employers, as a condition of employment, particularly when you're dealing with vulnerable populations, you can require flu shots, for example. So employers, I think that there's concern that somehow government is going to require everybody to have the immunization, but I think that would be quite a Rubicon to cross. But employers can have, and I don't know whether you dealt with that in the group home or not, Dick, but employers can make that as a condition of working in that particular employment setting.
I don't remember ever requiring flu shots. I think we required other immunization, including tetanus.
Jeanette was telling us the reverse this morning in judiciary.
Yeah, but
she was saying that you couldn't require, and my question was, then you might have half. She said somebody had the right to refuse the shot, and then the employer had the right to move them to a job where they weren't interacting with the public. But it seems to me we're an at-will state. So you can fire somebody for any reason, and this is an actual public health reason. So
yeah,
it seems like you'd be able to say you have to have it.
I don't ever remember it being an issue. I mean, I do remember people with health conditions that couldn't get certain vaccinations.
Sure. Well, it was medically
not advised. I don't
well,
remember it being an issue. Of course, we didn't have a pandemic to deal with.
No,
I'm actually the only place where I somewhat disagree with the governor on the age is on those with real medical difficulties that could also provide real danger for them if they were to catch COVID.
Yeah.
I feel bad for this one guy who's written me about his wife, who's in really bad shape, but she's under 65. So.
Well, it all comes down to the supply is limited.
She said that if we had the vaccine supply that we really need, this wouldn't be an issue.
It wouldn't.
So tomorrow, just a reminder, we have Peter Welch coming, and the timing couldn't be better. in terms of what the bill that's about to be voted on in the House, in the US House, that should provide substantial more money to the states. And I think it will help us kind of relook at any of the use of general fund, because some of that may in fact be areas of benefits or services that this additional federal money, which would be hundreds of millions of dollars, could help underwrite. So we're going to keep plugging away, but we're going to have the benefit maybe of a bit more information about those federal dollars. Anything that we do will have the language that if we use general fund and subsequently federal dollars become available, then we would see about kind of the swapping out. So I just want to mention that. So Stephanie, is there anything else that we have? We've closed out St. Joseph's. We're going to add that. Slaughterhouse, Bobby sent an email, and it basically is carve out $500,000 of the working lands. And
Star
All
gets
right.
everything he wants.
well, you're going to get the audit of your sheriffs, maybe.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, those are minor compared to his slaughterhouses.
Well, Becca likes slaughterhouses too. Don't forget.
I love slaughterhouses.
Oh, God.
I'm all for slaughterhouses. I did hear Bobby say yesterday, though, that if there were any cracks in our bill, he would be happy to fill them.
Oh, good.
Did I hear Becca loves slaughterhouses? Did I hear
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
I do. I'm very excited about
Yeah. Well,
Sorry, you better unmute because we can't hear your gloating. I can see you're gloating over there.
them.
Is
He's
Becky,
still on mute.
No, Bobby's on mute.
That's what I mean.
Who's he
okay,
talking to?
Alice and then Phil.
the slaughterhouse in Westminster a candidate for any of the money if they would reopen, or are they open and not doing well? Do you know?
No, there is a small one down in Westminster that does small animals, and the agency has been in contact with them and working with them.
So they are still open then. That's good. And how
Yeah.
about Black
But
River?
they need updating, Alice.
Well, can it be used to update? The money can be
Yeah.
used to update, right?
Yeah, this is general fund. We can use it any way we want.
And,
Start getting everything he wants.
and is the one,
No, I'm not. I didn't get a thing for my trucks. I need some money for my trucks, Jane.
Well,
He's
Alice has a
he's
question.
still in
I think,
every
for,
crack.
Alice, your rest of your question.
Bobby, do you have the slaughterhouse in Springfield on your list for anything?
I don't know if Springfield particularly has been in, but I know they have surveyed all of them. And the ones that they can get started on right away, that's what this money's for. And then we'll deal with the rest of it in the regular budget bill.
Because I have had farmers who would like to get in there, but they're so small that they can't go to that slaughterhouse at all.
No, they're out until 22, Alice, some of them. No room.
So Bobby, is
Yeah.
part of the problem just the staffing issues, just like we have at so many sectors? Is that part of the issue?
It's equipment too. Oh, there was also
Equipment.
training, right? There was training.
Yeah, and they're
that was-
gonna team up with BTC. They're planning on, because there's 2 slaughterhouses, one in Sharon and one right there in that neighborhood, that they can get professional meat cutters to come in and do the training. So there's training money mixed up in this, so they can get that started as well.
All right. So the thing is, right now, we're operating within, maybe I don't need to be too obsessed about that, but if we take that the House has got all 3 million just going to grants, unrestricted grants, competitive grants. We're talking about, out of that 3 million, 500 would go. The question I have is, would this be competitive grants? How do you envision this money going out within
I think
within
it's,
this? Because if we appropriate all 3 million, then there's nothing left to deal with slaughterhouses and the big bill. We'd have to find, if we do it, we would know that we'd have to find additional money.
Abby this morning thought that they would be in very good shape if we just okayed this 5 to 600,000. That would get them into July, and then it would give us an opportunity to deal with the other money. And she said that if we
Well,
get
I'm
this,
saying there may not be any, let's set it aside. If we say we're going to give 3 million appropriated for working lands, but out of that 500,000 will go to grants for slaughterhouses, then we have to find more money to go with the 3 million that we've already spent if we need more in 2022. In other words, if we move all the money out immediately in this, and the House is proposing all 3 million, there's the only thing I'm saying with your logic is, if you're saying, well, then they can get the rest in 22, then it's knowing that we've got to find the additional money, one-time money for 22, because we would have moved it all forward in this bill.
I would split it, Jane. And then that takes a monkey off our back. And I mean, if they can get by with the 500,000, which they said they'd be more than, it would, it'd work fine. And get.
Yeah, but that's with the understanding that they would have more money in 2022.
Yes, the 2.5 would still be coming, or 2 point something would still be coming. So they're gonna still be looking for that, the balance.
All right, so in total, what do they want?
3,
2.7?
3, I thought it was like 3 something.
Just for slaughterhouses.
And the educational part.
You going,
And,
can,
or you
All right.
mean for total for working lands?
No, I am talking slaughterhouses.
3, I think it's 3 point and change.
All right.
I'll send you that tomorrow.
Well, I may have it. I haven't had a chance to look at it. But I'm saying if we were taking slaughterhouses and saying we'll fund it out of that proposed allocation, we'll treat it as part of working lands, we only have 3 million right now specifically identified for working lands and slaughterhouses. And you can't have 3.2 for just slaughterhouses when you only have 3 million, and it's just, for both. So we're either going to have to add more money, or how we're going to do it relative to the 22 budget. So I just want to keep that in mind, that we may, if we move whatever money we move out, then we have to be thinking about what is that connection with the 22 budget.
2.2, 2 and 300, so that'd be 2.5, and 50 would be, meat processing's 2.7. And then we could add up to 300,000 for phase 1, which is 3 million, and a little, just a hair over.
Well, then you've spent all the working lands money.
Yeah, spend it all. No.
Well, no, you understand what I'm, committee, you understand what I'm saying here is we have 3 million proposed by the governor. If we want to move all this money out on slaughterhouses, and we still want to do something to move grants for working lands out, we're going to have, we're talking about more money than 3 million.
They said they only had one other project for $10,000, something about some washing station they wanted to fund.
Yeah, I'll believe that when I hear it. All right, I think we may have
Yeah.
Do we,
Keep
we
on.
have Commissioner Tierney here as
We
well?
do, and we have Patricia LaRose.
Okay. Oh, there's Commissioner Tierney. All right. So we're going to move off slaughterhouses and go to the Public Service Department. And I just want to thank you, Commissioner, for being available on such short notice. We had some time and we're just think it's beneficial to try to get as much testimony on the budget request as we can. So appreciate your coming, and we know time is of an essence because you have to leave at 3:30. So I'm going to let you run through. This is the Senate. You know, we want to deal with just the high points and in terms of your budget, and I'll let you take it from there in terms of what you're requesting and kind of the big changes. We know that there's a person with Pay Act and fee for space and workers' comp, et cetera. That's across everybody. So with that said, I'm going to let you take it from here so you can finish up by your 3:30 deadline.
Thank you very much, Chair Kitchell. June Tierney, Public Service Department for the record, and with me is Patty LaRose, our budget manager at the department. And frankly, I think by your description, Chair Kitchell, this can be very short. We don't have big changes to report this year. What I can tell you is that the combination of increasing the gross receipts tax a couple of years ago and the newly instituted fee for siting projects has cured the budget ills of the department as we know them. With the last year and the pandemic, there was a period of time where those fee revenues were not coming in, but that work was also not having to be done. And as far as I have seen so far, that has bounced back very quickly. As soon as developers could get back out in the field, they did, and the fees came back in as well. So really, that would be my big news for you.
That's good news.
Yeah, I think so. I would say it'll come as no surprise to you and your committee members that the department's mission has been largely diverted to emergency response in the past year. And I think we've delivered good value for Vermonters, and it's been truly an honor to be part of that. There's nothing like being able to help when people are in need. We did a program on quick notice to address electric arrearages, and I am very grateful that this committee supported appropriating some of the CRF money for that. We were able to get it out. This is something that my department's never done before, but we've got some people who know how to put together a program and fix the bugs and get it moving on short notice, and I'm just terribly proud of them. We also did quite a bit of work in the connectivity space, as you know. Last spring, we put out an emergency broadband action plan in draft form, and I had the pleasure of going around the state to many different stakeholders, including many of your colleagues in the legislature, to talk about those proposals. And overwhelmingly, the things that we had proposed doing during the emergency to get people connected are things that you then turned into statute and that we spent the past year working on. We are now looking forward to sizable federal funding, I hope, coming down the pike. And as I'm sure you're aware, there are different conversations happening right now about what the best receptacle or the best entity in state government would be, and at this point to administer such funding should it come to pass to address our last mile connectivity issues in Vermont. And my approach to that has been to support all of the conversations. I don't think anybody has a monopoly on what the best idea is. And the three ideas that are out there are in the House, a proposal to stand up a Vermont Community Broadband Authority, which would focus on supporting the communications union districts. In the Senate, as I understand it, what is coming is a proposal to revive the VTA, but in substantially different form. That's the Vermont Telecommunications Authority. And then there's the third one on the table that I've put out there as a concept, which is to create something similar to the Clean Energy Development Fund in the department. It would be called the Broadband Infrastructure Deployment Fund. The reason why I like my particular proposal is that it largely deals takes existing resources, it contemplates getting an executive director, and but otherwise makes use of existing infrastructure within the department. And so to the extent that there would be any funding change, it would be derived from a percentage of the one-time $20 million spend that the governor has included in his budget for broadband and connectivity development. As I said, I'm making myself available as a resource to help all the conversations in that direction, and trust that the legislature will come to a conclusion that it finds reasonable, and the governor will then review that, and I'll know by July what my agency looks like.
So
Are there
Commissioner,
questions? Yes, ma'am.
I do have a question. One thing that we know that the House has put in their bill, when we did the budget adjustment, we put in language to keep the unobligated money from being reverted.
Last
But,
year's
it
CRF
would-
money.
Right, and that was about 3.2. It was a bit more than that, but we took some and used it for the internet subsidy, and brought it down to about 3.2. The House, I believe, has recommended spending 2.2 of that 3.2. Can you just brief us on, because that would be in the FAST bill that we're trying to move out ahead of the budget. Do you know what that 2.2 it would be, but their bill will use that for? And do you have an opinion on that?
You'll forgive me, I think I'm drawing a bit of a blank when it comes to what the House precisely is proposing to do with the remaining CRF money. But if memory serves, there's a piece of it that is proposed to continue some of the programs that we had last year, one being the line extension program. And I think they otherwise are looking to give money to the CUDs to continue some of their planning work and their administrative costs as they near the point of proposing actual projects for construction. That's the best that I remember right now. Chair Kitchell, I'm happy to look into that if you.
Oh, no, I thought that since you were here, I know
I'm sorry, yeah.
we've asked our finance committee to give us their recommendation.
Yeah, my head in House Energy Technology has been more in how they are trying to fund the Vermont Community Broadband Authority. And in that space, they're looking to take the funding that is otherwise set aside for the connectivity initiative that builds last mile projects. And there's a bit of a wrinkle there because, as I think you're aware, the E911 board is experiencing some trouble as well.
Yeah, they're
And
fourth
so-
on the list of 4 beneficiaries and they're running a
Right.
deficit. Yeah.
And
Well-
I've been slow walking using the connectivity initiative funds for last mile build out this year, in part because we've been doing so much with the CRF money, and in part because I've been aware of that deficit story and have wanted to preserve that option for you to possibly reach in and take away my hard fought money for last mile broadband if you need to. As you recall, perhaps a couple of years ago, there was a 0.4% increase in the VUSF tax. And that's been ring fenced statutorily for connectivity initiative and long last mile build out. But that's fifth on the totem pole, where E911 is fourth. And so logic would suggest that you perhaps not go to number 5, but instead send the money to number 4. I hope that's
Okay.
helpful to you.
Well, we're aware, Senator Starr and I met with Barbara Neal, and we're very well aware of the fiscal situation that the 911 is in terms of the revenue, and they're going to end the year with either they need some help to close out the year, or they're not going to be paying some people because they don't have the money. So
that's a situation that needs a long-term fix. Much as you had the vision to understand that the department needed a long-term fix for its revenue problems. The E911 is experiencing that problem, and the public education governmental television folks
we know
also had that problem. So and it's all a function of how the usage of landline telephones is changing. That's not going to go back to the old days. So a more comprehensive think is needed here.
Well, we just have a report on the PEG.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, so that's our finance is taking some conversation, some testimony on that. Other questions. Your budget is good news. It's, as I say to my son, boring is good. And,
Yes. Anytime the
and,
Commissioner of Public Service can be boring, she's grateful. So,
I know it's a good place to be.
it is.
And then we'll figure out, we have the governor's proposal for broadband, and then we still have the 3.2 remaining for CRF. And we're getting obviously recommendations from our finance committee on that.
Yes, and I've visited with them on those. My recommendation to them had been that they allow us to continue spending that money on the purposes for which you authorized it last year, because those were good purposes and they were thought through and people reached agreement. But I do understand that with all the changes that have happened in Washington, D.C., you may have other uses for that money. I just wanted to preserve a moment for everybody to stand still and say, do we still want to do this? And so in conjunction with the sunset provision, Senator Kitchell, that you and I have worked on, I just sort of drew everything to a halt and said, okay, department, we're not spending any more of that money. We're not obligating it. We're not doing another thing until we've got the budget adjustment out of the way and we know what the legislature and the governor want to do.
But you did have identified projects that weren't ready to be obligated as of December 20th. That if the funding were, I'm just asking.
I want to think carefully about how you phrased that. Did we have projects that were not?
Well, I know that we had projects where they were not completed, but a commitment had been made.
Yes,
What
they
I'm
were
saying
obligated.
is-
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there was obligated. I'm just wondering, back up in the queue, are there other projects that would be advanced to be funded if with the remaining 3.2 million?
To my knowledge, Senator Kitchell, subject to check, no. The
Okay.
issue there is very much that we had dispersed the connectivity fund initiative money, which was about $12 million. And then we ran into the cliff issue, the December 30 issue, and the sunset, so that we've not been able to pay out on obligations that were incurred well before December 30. There may be some work that the CUDs would be in a position to do. I have to check on that. And that's possibly, those are possibly things that could be taken up now, given that the cliff has gone away. But I wouldn't want to be more specific because my memory isn't entirely clear there. I do recall saying to your colleagues in Senate Finance that if they chose to do something other than just continue the projects authorized last year, it would mean that they take some dollars from what remains from the line extension program and some dollars that remain from the broadband subsidy program that was not means tested. Just to put a flag in this, the federal government has created a program and allocated $3.2 billion to broadband subsidies that the FCC will be administering. The department's been commenting on that, but that is going to be means tested, which means that there are Vermonters who, in my judgment, still need help with that bill, but who will not qualify because they're just outside the parameters of the customary governmental means testing. So anyway, you take dollars from those two pots and aggregate them in a CUD pot for them to possibly use for purposes that are beneficial during the emergency. I'm sorry, Senator Kitchell.
Well, I wondered if they were using the income test for that of 80% median income.
I think that's the case. They're very conventional means testing standards.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're using for rental assistance, and
exactly,
which includes utilities. And so I was just wondering if that might be the standard that they're applying, the income.
I think it is. I mean, what I see happening is that as the emergency progresses, people are starting to more finely calibrate the need that they want to reach with these emergency dollars. And I understand that well from a policy perspective, but here at home in Vermont, as you folks know, I'm sure, we've got plenty of folks who for the first time in their lives are standing in line getting food and the like, and they may fall outside of those parameters, but their need is still there.
Or just the line extensions would be just to make access possible for all Vermonters. Many of them were working from home or whatever. All right. Well, that's unfortunate that it's going to be more of an income tested, almost household by household, as opposed to being able to look at how we build out
That's for the subsidy that gets you access to a subscription. I have not seen any proposal to means test in the realm of line extensions, because that's a state-based, that's a program we created in
No,
the state.
no, but with the CRF, they had constraints about how the money could be
Yes.
spent. And it
Yes.
couldn't be just to support the general. I was
That's
hoping that
correct.
maybe in the next slug of federal money, there's something that would help, just like transportation infrastructure got 50 million. It would be nice to have broadband infrastructure of X million simply for all users
Yes.
in a more universal way.
I wouldn't give up hope. It may not come in this this CRF type money, but the national pressure is considerable, and it has changed enormously in the last year. The recognition that we need to do this differently in the United States. So I am more confident than ever that there will be a broadband bill coming out of Washington, D.C. that will be separate from the 1.5 that's under debate right now. It's just so obvious that people need broadband and connectivity.
Senator Starr.
Yeah, I was wondering, June, are you the one we'd ask about? We've heard a lot about poles and who owns poles and who can hook to certain poles and who can't, light poles. Is it your crew that deals with
Yes.
that? And
Yes.
could you give us a little update on because those poles go to the last mile in most cases and would really help out in rural areas if we could run a wire on them.
Indeed. So the department is absolutely the right place to go for questions like that. And I think it would be best if I put Clay Purvis in touch with you for specifics on that. But in a nutshell, we have been doing some work in trying to expedite make-ready work and inviting the utilities to have a tool in the toolbox that allows the poles to be made ready, especially during the emergency, to string the facilities that you're talking about. There are some challenges because you get into cross subsidy issues, electric ratepayers and telecommunications and whatnot. But that, in my judgment, is really where the change in thinking needs to happen, because increasingly energy and telecommunications are becoming one. I mean,
Yeah.
I just got out of a meeting with the energy efficiency people, actually, where they were explaining that they had been trying to stand up a $5 bill credit in the efficiency world in Washington Electric's territory. And they found through a survey that the takers they would have couldn't take because they lacked broadband access. And so now you're starting to cross into, gee, shouldn't the electric utility, if all ratepayers in a territory are paying for something, shouldn't they have some responsibility to make it available to all ratepayers in the service territory? So those conversations are underway.
Good.
Senator Westman, sorry, Bobby, are you done?
No,
We'll move.
I'm good. Appreciate it.
Senator Westman.
I just say that much of Senator Starr's territory is Vermont Electric territory, and I am on the board. And we were able to do the survey of what was needed to get our poles ready, and that survey was a grant from your department.
Excellent.
And the department was very helpful in helping us figure out what needed to be done in that. Now we've got to get to the place where we can do that, but it was a grant, and the department has been helpful. And I would say that that was very helpful.
I'm so glad to hear that, Senator Westman, because I think that's a good example of how the department and the legislature have been able to work together to get us to that place where we're doing these things. And your utility in particular has been very impressive. When I first took office, I started talking about broadband to the electric utilities, and there was a lot of talk to the hand. We do electricity, not broadband. And VEC really stepped it up, but they were impressively conservative in doing it. And I really think Rebecca Town's leadership has been critical in this. I'm glad you see that on your end.
I would say to you, I'm very glad that you bring up the issue of cross subsidization, because it becomes very difficult. Our revenues are all from electric customers, but going forward into the future, if we can get our poles ready to run fiber to them, it's an opportunity for us. But because it's an issue of broadband, and we aren't supposed to cross subsidize electrical cost with that, I think that the state really needs to struggle with that issue.
And it's going to, because Washington Electric actually, because they can borrow money as a co-op at a much lower rate than the CUDs,
Exactly.
is proposing to do it for their service area, but in exchange, they want to have the poles
Yes.
exempt from property taxes. So that raises a number of questions about how, and it's for that reason, you can't cross subsidize. So if they're willing to leverage that to get new poles and the wire, then how does that get financed outside that rate structure?
Right.
So that's something that is in House Ways and Means and Energy and Technology as we speak.
That's
Maybe
good
there
to
are other
know.
ways,
Yeah.
because people have said to us, look, and I don't remember who testified, but when you're putting grants out to CUDs, there should be some way of getting that money back. They're going to be raising money. They're going to have revenues at some point to help offset. So the question becomes one of the business plan, the extent to which we use that low rate financing that's available to co-ops, but is a property tax exemption the best way of financing that, avoiding that cross subsidization? And so it gets pretty complicated. But
Those are those are good issues. If you don't mind, Senator Kitchell, I would just want to leave Senator Westman with the following thought, and that is that cross subsidy is always, it's a very core traditional issue in utility regulation. It's important to remember, though, that the standard as it exists is unjust cross subsidy is forbidden, not cross subsidy. It's forbidden because the legislature has written a law that says that, which means the legislature can write other laws. And the way you've handled this in the past, for instance, with low income rates, was to write a law that directed the PUC to undertake an investigation and to consider instituting low income rates that necessarily have a cross subsidy in them, but in considering whether to do it, to weigh factors that would help determine whether it's just or unjust. And I had the privilege of doing that work, by the way, at the PUC. But my point is that you have a lot of tools in the toolkit if you think that the urgency of the issue of connectivity is such that you want to rethink a little bit our thoughts around cross subsidies.
I totally get that, and I totally get it is the law in it, but in many cases the legislature acts in as a reaction to what an administration proposes too.
Indeed, I'm mindful of that. I thought you were going to say in mysterious ways.
No, we do in the proposing, and that is an issue. But I would say for the electric company to be able to use broadband, if we're going to get behind the meter and we're going to cut off the peaks and we're going to be able to reduce our consumption during peak times, we might have to spend something up front. And, for electrical companies and co-ops to move ahead, and the municipals, some clarity will be needed.
And the Internet of Things,
I'm very
don't forget
conscious.
that.
I'm
Yes,
conscious
ma'am.
of the time because
Gotta
the commissioner
go.
said she had to leave at 3:30. So
I do. My next meeting's actually about a utility with a tariff to
Yes, okay.
make ready work done. So if you'll forgive me, I've enjoyed visiting with you.
It's perfectly fine. I just want to make sure that we respect your schedule.
Thank you so
We'll
much.
let you go. And I think what Chrissy did was change our schedule around today.
Goodbye.
So we're all set. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Bye.
Good job.
And I think, Chrissy, then we we just went through kind of solid session to get done at 3:30 today.
That's correct. We forego the break, so you could just carry on and adjourn a bit early.
Okay. I don't think anyone will have a opposition to that, so I'm going to